What's up, y'all? I got a dance deal for you, Chicago. Hubbard Street Dance heats up the Harris Theater stage with its spring series of Joy next week. Now, this is some of the most dynamic, cutting-edge contemporary dance made by the world's leading choreographers right here in Chicago. I'm excited for echoes of our ancestors by Maria Torres, among other creators. But you can only catch it for 3 performances between May 17th and May 19th. Luckily, CityCast Chicago listeners can get tickets in any section for 20% off using code CityCast online or over the phone. Visit hubbardstreetdance.com for details and use code CityCast. Today on CityCast Chicago, with summertime shot just over the horizon, we finna be outside, y'all. So now is the time to get your plans together, maybe dust off them dancing shoes and practice your two-step as we get ready for summer dance in the parks and Chicago Dance Month in June. Maybe this is the summer you'll learn how to footwork. Yes, I'm talking about the classic Chicago style that grew out of house and juke music. We talked to a lifelong dancer and footwork historian about the roots of the genre and where you can find it today. It's Thursday, May 9th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. All right, before we get into the culture of footwork, we need to back it up a little bit. First, I need you to picture what it looks like. So imagine like a classic hip hop dance battle, right? I'm talking 1v1s, crews versus crews, like a little bit of contemporary dance mixed with b-boy, with break dance, and now speed it up to 160 beats per minute. Make the hand and feet movement sharper, more aggressive, yet smoother, precise, and explosive all at the same time. That's footworking. Dr. Shadon Battle is the creator of the docu-series Footwork Saved My Life and is the artist as instigator at Chicago's National Public Housing Museum. And let her and her crew tell it, a legend in the footwork community. Dr. Battle, welcome to CityCast Chicago.
Thank you for having me.
So for me, I grew up in the roller skating rinks on the south side of Chicago and in the south suburbs, from the rink on 87 to Markham. And even as somebody who loved roller skating, I knew, especially when I went to Markham on like Saturday nights, about 2 hours in, you realize ain't nobody out on the skate floor anymore. They all in that back party room juking, or they standing in a circle watching people footwork. But for people listening who may not be familiar, can you describe what is footworking?
Footwork is a culture and an art form, it comes from Chicago, comes from the inner city of Chicago. We go back and forth about whether it comes from the west side or the south side, but it's likely from the west side and migrated south, and now it exists in both places. And it's a fast-paced dance of the feet, and with, complementing arm gestures. And it would be erroneous to define Chicago footwork apart from its music, footwork tracks. And so you've got the dance, you've got the DJs, it's the culture, it's the legs, the feet, the dance, and it's also, the venues, right? The space that beheld Chicago footwork and nurtured it and cultivated it, right? I always say it wasn't born in Juilliard, it was born in our back alleys and these drab skating rinks and garages. And it's something that is integral to growing up in Chicago. It's a staple of Chicago cultural identity, Black Chicago cultural identity. And it's been super important to my upbringing.
Man, when we've on this show covered the contributions of Black Chicago to Chicago's place in music, whether we're talking house music, whether we're talking gospel music, when we've talked about some of the dances that Chicago is seminal for, we've talked about stepping, and footworking is, in my opinion, on that Mount Rushmore of Black Chicago's contributions to the larger Black culture. And like I said earlier, if I had to think about the first time I saw it, it was probably in a roller skating rink or in somebody's garage for a house party and like the second grade. For you, when was some of your earliest memories of seeing footwork? Like, how old were you? Where were you?
I call it my origin stories, my footwork origin stories. I've got two of them. So I was a skater. My whole family skates, right? And I also am descended from, a generation above me that were like house heads too. So like I grew up, my auntie used to have these massive parties in the backyard. And so, you hear ooh, ah, ee. So the music was always like, yeah. My actually like the first song I ever sang was Jack Your Body. Right, as a 3-year-old. And so I grew up in a tradition of house music. So it was only sort of like natural that I would gravitate toward its descendant, Chicago footwork, ghetto house music at the time, which is now like just juke music. And my god sister, I started hanging around my god sister, and I would see her and her friends at the rink, and I just wanted to be a part of that culture. And so she would come over in my basement and teach me. And then next, my cousin and I were learning, and we were like trying to, go to practices here and there that were happening at Cole Park. Final Phase at the time was practicing at Cole Park. And then this guy pulled up in a U-Haul.
Bernard.
Yeah, Bernard is it's like my brother, my brother for real is crazy. And he hopped out like, hey, y'all dance, y'all footwork. And so he started dancing in front of the house with us. And then I didn't know that he was this, this guru in the culture at the time. And so he started teaching me. And I took, a lot of his style and sort of integrated it into my own. And it was up from there. The bass is, the defining musical element of Chicago footwork, the bass and the claps, and they come through the speaker, and it just transports you into a different world almost, right? And it was an escape from everything. Like you just are sort of just, transported into a different world. It was like this whole underground, I call it like this underground culture, right? This sort of manhole. Like, I don't know if you've read Invisible Man, but he descends into this manhole, and like his life and who he is illuminates before him. And that's kind of what Chicago footwork was, right? It wasn't something that you were going to see at these like elite institutions. It was like this underground culture that gave you a different kind of visibility that you weren't getting if you were fortunate to go downtown, right? Like Chicago was a city that doesn't see Black youth, or if they do see Black youth, it's like in really like hyper visible, negative, dehumanizing kind of ways. And so it made us culturally legible to ourselves, to one another.
I love what you said about the ability to transport you, because it's not simply outside or distinct from like your material and your everyday circumstances. It also had a way of transporting you across time and space. Like you could see traditions of African dance, traditions of great migratory dance, like clearly present in this art form, whether people were aware of it or not while they were in it.
Yeah, sure, for sure. Right, you're just going through the motions, not realizing that history is being made in the process of you joining this culture, right, and creating your identity in it. But when I started to like research, Chicago footwork, it became just abundantly clear of how similar it is to a lot of African diasporic, like, cultural forms, like the importance that we put on the circle. The circle is really important to African and Afro-American cultural traditions. There's a lot of similarities between Chicago footwork and the first Black street dance, tap dance, right? And so I work with Donetta Little Bit Jackson, who's a tap dancer in Chicago. And footwork, it was so easy for her to learn. If you hear her story and how she learned to footwork, like right on the spot, and it's because the rhythms were so similar.
Are you self-conscious about your smile? Do you only allow yourself a closed mouth grin? Well, with aligner experts, there's no reason for you to diminish your smile. As orthodontists, they have the privilege of witnessing the remarkable transformation of patients' smiles, which often translates into a profound boost in their confidence. Yet, there always seems to be a deterrent. I ain't got the time, I don't have the funds. Luckily, Aligner Experts is redefining convenient and accessible clear aligner solutions. With customizable treatments, transparent pricing, and their cutting-edge 3D scanners and dental monitoring technology, you can transform your smile through the convenience of your own schedule. Stop in at their West Loop or Lakeview clinic today for your complimentary smile assessment. Aligner Experts, your destination for advanced clear aligner solutions. P.S. They got another clinic on the way, so stay tuned for their Old Town location.
It's only a kick, a jump, a block. It's only a serve. It's only a tackle, a run. It's only for the fans. After all, it's only pressure. You got this. Adidas.
Obviously, footworking is so, like, the music is so integral to the process. For you, what were those songs? Because when I hear Bounce and Break Your Back.
Bounce and break your back, you bounce so hard, you break your back, girl. Bounce and break your back.
Like, I knew, all right, it was time to get off the floor. It was time to go into the other room. Like, you were being called in the same way that James Brown called you to the skate floor. Some of these songs called you to the dance floor. What were those for you?
I like the way that you phrase it. I call it like incantatory. It's almost like, even I say like, it's almost like Weekend at Bernie's, right? Like you could be asleep, almost dead in church. Your body gonna start moving to that music. But for me, it was like a lot of RP Boo, the ice cream track. It was Nation Ho, it was like some Clint, and it was like, now I understand why, like why they were so like raunchy and abrasive, right? But because they were born from the projects. But yeah, like when them tracks hit, that bass hit, bum 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 bum. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a different kind of feeling, right? Like your body, it's like a call and response. Your body is automatically going to gravitate toward the bass of Chicago footwork music.
You've been working on a docuseries that centers on Chicago footwork called Footwork Saved My Life. We've talked about why it's significant to Chicago, but who are some of the people you followed during that journey?
I went back first, right? Like I went back to the people who I thought were pioneers, and they were like, no, you got to go talk to so-and-so. You got to go talk to so-and-so. So, I started with the people who I knew growing up. I started with Clint and Chip and Waxmaster and Traxman and, some of the early, ghetto house pioneers. So I started with the music. Then also I went back and talked to some of the first dance group presidents, right, who are also pioneers in their own right. And then we kind of just made our way through multiple, generations, right, from, the Mad Dogs. We went out to LA. We talked to King Charles to try to figure out, like, why is footwork outside of Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. Why every 5 minutes is somebody sending me this white girl going crazy footworking? And then we began to understand the globalization of Chicago footwork and how important social media was to its to his development and how it became something very different in the third generation. So it was important to me to get, that story and to also make sure that the West Side was being included, because the West Side has been, super integral to, what Chicago footwork is. Everybody talking about you don't footwork if you can't ghost. The ghost came from the West Side, right? It migrated to the South Side.
Can you describe that for people who may not be familiar?
Yeah, so the Holy Ghost was actually one of the first Chicago footwork moves, and it was it looked like catching the Holy Ghost, where you're like throwing your hand in this movement and rolling your head, and it's a staple, it's a foundational move, right? The Ghost. It's the first Chicago footwork dance move, because it was like this dance culture initially, and then it morphed into something more specific with a definable identity, right? Where you're doing specific moves with the feet. Ant Brown, of course, I spoke to, brought the Irks to Chicago footwork, the Irk and Jerk. I had to trace the movements. I had to trace the dance. And then I had to trace all of these cultural evolutions. And that took me to different people, right? Spoke to the Minnesota footworkers. I've sat down with the folks from Japan to try to figure out what does that culture look like, because it shows up very differently in their movement because their struggles are not our struggles, right? And Chicago Footwork is a release. It's this thing where we release our muscular tensions, right? And so it's much more aggressive here than it is in other places in the world because this is an aggressive place that we live in, right? Right. And it's not just like the violence, but it's also just the cultural heartbeat of Chicago is something that is just, aggressive.
It's largely because it's always like fighting up against the possibility that someone's trying to extinguish it, right? Whether it's the city, whether it's we're talking about public housing, which you do a great job of connecting Footwork to throughout your series.
No, for sure, right? It's all of these structural forces that attempt to dispossess you. So this is another reason Chicago Footwork is within Chicago are sometimes resistant to outsiders gravitating toward it because they're like, this is our lifeblood. This is the thing that we wake up and do. This is the thing that gives us momentum to keep going, right? We're so used to things being taken away from us and to being dispossessed, right? Our schools, 55 schools closing, the loss of infrastructure and practice spaces, like, because people didn't just lose their homes. When the high rises came down, people lost networks and communities and cultures, dance groups disbanded. So, yeah, I mean, I think that the way that Footwork shows up, right, like sonically and just through the movements is a reflection of what it looks like to be Black and to grow up in Chicago.
What do you hope people take away from the exploration of Footwork? Like what do you hope they remember?
Man, I hope people remember that, like, much like people did during the Harlem Renaissance and, much like, what we did with chitlins as enslaved people, what we created out of nothing, like Chicago Footwork is an art form born from this will to survive and, to be known amongst ourselves and to create a sense of community amongst ourselves when our communities are always sort of up against all these structural forces, right? It's how Black youth survived in Chicago and how they created a name for themselves. I say, like, DJ Clint is literally the rose that grew from the concrete. He made music, transformed ghetto house culture using the concrete walls of, his project building on 39th Street, right? And so, like, what does it mean to understand, there's gang violence, of course, and, there are drug, saturated streets, there's over policing, but we're going to create something.
Where can people go now if they want to learn the Footwork, if they want to go meet up with other dancers to see the best Chicago footworkers?
What you see now, like, is the emergence of, like, these battle tournaments, right? Like, where these, like, some of the leaders, they find places and they host Terror Dome, they host, some of these other tournaments, the Cage, right? But what's also happening is that, you got folks like Goon Squad and they use their studios for battle spaces. 87th Street, right off the Dan Ryan. I think they also have another location. Reese is creating a battlegrounds again, right? Because battlegrounds was something that was really important in the third generation moving into the fourth.
What was battlegrounds?
So battlegrounds is, was a place where, you got this storefront, east side of 87th Street, and basically all the footworkers gonna meet up, a bunch of different DJs, and you battle, right? Like, and it was kind of different from Warzone because Warzone was so sort of media centric and camera focused, camera centric. But while you can catch battlegrounds battles on YouTube, it wasn't like that's really, it was just gutter, like, trenches, and you might catch some gambling in the back or whatever. But that was, like, really important to defining the third generation of Chicago Footwork. So there was battlegrounds, and then there was also Warzone. But these, like, even out west, right? And House of Works, they're creating different spaces for people to come and be in community out west and to battle and Footwork. The era is still doing a lot, right?
Yeah.
In terms of just putting Footwork on the map. But yeah, I mean, Footwork is still alive and well in Chicago. It's thriving.
Dr. Shadon Battle, from myself, the entire CityCast Chicago team, thank you for telling this story, and thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, of course, I can't let you go without some good news. And I just wanted to give another thank you to Public Narrative, who tonight is awarding me with the 2024 Uplifting Voices Award alongside the co-founders of True Star Media. Again, this award wouldn't even be possible if it wasn't for all of the people who listen to CityCast Chicago, our amazing team and staff. I just wanted to take this time again to say thank you. Thank you to the people who listen to CityCast Chicago. Thank you to our entire team and staff. Thank you for the people who nominated me. If you can't tell, I absolutely love doing this job every single day. So I just appreciate y'all coming along for the ride. Please join us back here bright and early tomorrow when I sit down with the Pulitzer Prize winning duo, Sarah Conway and Trina Reynolds Tyler, to look back on some important stories from the week. We'll talk to you then. Peace.